About 200 million years ago, some real do-it-your-own-way sorts of lizards split off from the rest. While the other lizards were mainly hunting during the day, these ones figured that at night the line would be shorter at the buffet. So these little plucky bastards evolved incredibly sensitive night vision, nearly 350 times more sensitive than ours, and in color too. Their pupils evolved the ability to open wide into a gaping eye hole that let in more light. And as if that wasn't enough, they told evolution to get rid of the eyelids. Screw blinking. Evolution was like, that's how we keep your eyes moist. But these geckos were like, just do it, we'll figure it out. So they started using their tongues instead. Now, most of those daytime lizards communicate using body language, throw in a pop of color now and then. But at night, even with the special vision, that wasn't ideal. So you know what they did? Their throat parts evolved a voice box. Now they won't shut up. Just booty calls all night. It's a mess. I mean, different ones do it different. It's like a rainbow of annoying. Some of these geckos followed their insect snacks up into the trees. And some of those got real good at putting the bush in ambush. Started blending right in, like the satanic leaf-tailed gecko. I mean, it was just going for leaf. I was a bit surprised when the whole satanic thing got added. But if you want to hide in the trees, you got to get up in the trees to begin with. They did have claws, but try chasing a beetle across a leaf. Nothing to hang on to. And so some geckos evolved, not once, but a few times, one of the most incredible adaptations. Many geckos, especially the ones good at climbing, have these pads on their toes. If you take a cross-section of the foot, you can see that these pads are made out of little tiny hair-like structures called setae, and these are mostly made of keratin. Now the tips of these setae get quite bushy, and that's because at their very ends they branch off into all these little spatula-looking things called spatulae, for once science made it easy. Now you'll notice that all these structures seem to have a bit of a curve to them, bending towards the back of the foot. And that means when a gecko puts its foot straight down, all those little spatulae aren't really making contact with anything. But if the gecko pulls its foot back just a little bit, that shearing or dragging motion causes the spatulae to come in contact with the surface. And the hair-like structure of the setae means that they can conform to surfaces. And a bit like a refrigerator magnet, even if you slide them around like this, they remain firmly attached. Now there can be up to 1 billion spatulae on each gecko foot. And in this position, that gecko foot is contacting the surface thousands of times more than our finger would. The point of all this is that when molecules get really close, and I mean really close, electrons in one molecule will move away from the electrons in the other. And this change creates a tiny electric force between the positives and the negatives. You've experienced van der Waals forces because that's how Scotch tape works. Tape, though, has a different strategy for getting all that contact. It has this thin layer of material that flows a little bit when you apply pressure, and that allows it to form itself to the shape of the surface. But having Scotch tape on your foot would be a real bitch. It's not exactly reusable, it resists being pulled off, it gets dirty, and there's nothing worse than dirty Scotch tape, and if it gets wet, forget about it. But geckos' feet have ways to deal with all of this. Hi, I'm Zay Frank. We're not doing sponsorships anymore, so please consider joining my Patreon to support this show. There's also a channel called TrueFactsEducational where I upload versions of these videos that are more appropriate for classrooms and younger audiences. Where were we? Oh, right. Now, one slightly odd thing about these adhesive gecko toe pads is that they are a bit overpowered, or OP as the kids like to say. Just a single toe can support their whole body weight. I mean, it's like driving to the grocery store in a Lamborghini. With all that power, you have to have some finesse. So each gecko toe has tendons running through them that can help control the activation of those setae. Also, when activated, those toes kind of engorge with blood to help push down the setae into the surface. Now, when it's time to let go, they relax those tendons and let their little toe erections go soft. Then they activate these little muscles on their tippy-tippy toes, curling their toes backwards and up and peeling off those setae row by row. This is called digital hyperextension. Now, in addition to being a good way to unstick yourself, digital hyperextension seems to have another benefit. Now, I'm not sure if you've been in a forest, but they're quite dirty. And geckos walk around barefoot, hippies. But if you get a bunch of forest dirt clogging up your spatulae, then that adhesive system won't work. But it turns out these toe pads are self-cleaning. And this works in two ways. The first has to do with how many spatulae can realistically attach to a particle of dirt. The density of the spatulae and the shape of the particle means that often there's not enough spatulae attached to overcome the van der Waals forces that the particle has with the surface. But what if there are? If those spatulae really are holding on to a piece of dirt, that's where the digital hyperextension comes in. As they curl their toes back, they build up tension on those attached cilia. When that tension overcomes the force of attachment, those spatulae sort of pop off, and that creates a sort of catapult for the particle. So if they dirty a footsie, the best thing to do is keep walking. Look at that, after only 8 steps, and they leave behind little dirt footprints. Here's one up close, and after only 5 steps, show off. Sure, there's some dirt left, but the tips of the spatulae are clean. Now, even if they step in something they can't clean off, they only have to wait a month or 2 until they shed, get brand new equipment. Looks like dish gloves and a hazmat suit. Now, a lot of geckos live where it's quite wet, and considering they use dry adhesion, this can be a problem. But before we get to their feet, there's something amazing that happens on their bodies. The gecko's skin is quite hydrophobic, meaning water doesn't really like to attach to it. But in this case, it's super hydrophobic, goes to 11. Gecko's skin is covered with these little bumpies. The bumpies look like they might be sort of smooth, but if you take a closer look, they're covered in tiny little hairs. And this means that in addition to the hairs being hydrophobic, that water droplet is also sitting on pockets of air. Now this all means that water droplets will often just roll right off, but something else is going on. If 2 droplets come in contact with each other on this surface, they'll merge and hop right off. It's like magic. Now this has to do with surface tension. Let's say we have 2 water droplets, each with a radius of 1 unit. With math, we can figure out their volume and surface area. So between the 2 of them, before they merge, they have this amount. Now watch what happens when they come together. The volume or amount of water stays the same, but in the new droplet there's less surface area. And that means that some of the energy that was used to hold those spheres together is released as motion. Now inside this new droplet there's a lot of sloshing around. From the water coming together and now this energy, the side forces more or less cancel each other out. Upwards, there's nothing stopping it, but down, you've got a solid hydrophobic surface that pushes back on that force, and pop! Now this is great when there's an accumulation of dew, but also if water comes down from the top. Back to their feet. When it's really wet, you can see that they're f***ed. But there is some evidence that just a small layer of water, like when it's humid, actually helps them stick. If they step in water, they seem to have a self-drying thing going on, which also works by just walking. It's not totally clear how it works, not sciencing hard enough apparently, but it could have something to do with these lipids they found in the structure of the spatulae. If you remove those lipids, the gecko's cilia get wet real fast, which makes sense because lipids are kind of oily and might help push water away. But it seems counterintuitive that they would have something oily on a structure that acts as an adhesive. One idea is that they might actually help these toe pads not be too sticky. Like I said, they're a bit overpowered. When geckos walk horizontal, they keep their toes up. It's like those little hassles you don't think about when you have a superpower. Even when they're climbing, they're usually not using the whole system. When they go upwards, they mainly use their front feet for adhesion. The back feet are more for pushing off the surface, which is especially important when you go vertical, because you don't want your weight distribution to be such that when you take a step, you topple over backwards. Now the reverse is true when they're going downhill. The back feet are the ones that use adhesion, and you can think of the front ones sort of as brakes. But for the back feet to engage those toe pads, they need to be rotated around so the angle's right. Now when they're upside down, they have to engage all 4 feet. But even then, they only have to use a fraction of their potential. But of course, the world they live in isn't just glass and stucco. They gotta deal with bark and leaves and things that are wet, and sometimes they have to do that in a hurry or die. So having an overpowered system might sort of be a fail-safe in case things go haywire. Helps to have a backup. I'm sure that's why a lot of them kept their claws. Even that tail comes in handy. I mean, look at that, right? When you think the poor bastard's gonna fall over backwards, slaps that tail down. Old school. And let me tell you, they use that tail quite a bit. Like, check out what happens when they fall. To right themselves, they whip that tail around in the opposite direction. Sort of like when you kick to untangle yourself from a swing. And it all happens incredibly fast. In fact, it's the fastest self-righting of any non-flying creature. If you put one in a vertical wind tunnel, why wouldn't you? You can see they use their tail as an active stabilizer, but also as a rudder. Look at this one, figured out how to move forward by undulating its body. This is the kind of shit Superman has to do when no one's watching. And all of this is incredibly useful for when they jump. I mean, come on, you ever seen jumping like that? I mean, the form's impeccable. It's like air ballet. Now the landing, not so much. They have a bit of a belly flop sort of thing going. On purpose, mind you, helps distribute the impact when they land horizontal. But when they want to land on a vertical surface, they have a different strategy. Comes in strong and takes it right in the face. Probably why they're in the research and not doing it. And if you're thinking, oh, that doesn't look that bad, you should see them in the wild. The footage isn't great because they do it in private. It's embarrassing. But this one took it on the noggin at 13 miles an hour. It's like a fail video, but on purpose. And you can see they hit hard enough that their whole upper body has some recoil. But their tail helps stop the rotation while their back feet hold on, which is great for when they come out of the concussion. Some geckos even have another one of those adhesive pads on their tails. Why not? Now, with a tail as useful as all that, you'd think they'd keep them pinned to their body like you might a pair of mittens to a child's winter coat. But listen, some days when you're a gecko just really suck. Like Edgar here was just on his way to Costco to get there before the doors opened and ran into Big Steve. But Edgar wasn't going to miss out on that 2-for-1 moist wipes deal. So look at that, his tail pops right off. And Big Steve didn't do that, the gecko did. Now, Big Steve's having some tail for dinner. But listen, if you're thinking, oh, if I could do that, I'd pop it off at parties in a lull. Well, you should know it's actually a real pain in the ass. That's right, eat that dad joke. The gecko's tail has a number of areas where the muscles form these sort of triangle shapes. These triangles wrap around the tail and form a crown, which ends up being sort of like a plug that fits into sockets on the other side. The muscles don't go across those triangles, they stop. So you might be wondering what holds the damn thing together. But if you look closely at the surface of these tips, they got these little bumpy mushroomy things all over them. And these structures seem to be used for adhesion. Again with the adhesion. On a normal day, that adhesion keeps things tight. But if they contract those muscles, they can break that adhesive bond. And you can see that little crown thing just sort of pop out. The vertebra underneath this area has a break point in it, so it snaps off too. There's very little blood because they have a mechanism to cut off the artery. Now the tail part, it keeps going. Little reflexes firing off gives a predator something to look at. It's not something you see every day. Stumpy, on the other hand, now has to deal with not having a tail. You know, doctor's orders lay off the jumping, but they also have a different weight distribution. The gecko's nervous system, however, adapts to this. And even without the tail, they're pretty much just as good at hunting as they were before. Now the tail regenerates. It takes about a month or so. You know, there's some awkward moments in there. You don't go out to the club with a red rocket, I'll tell you that. But the final product looks very similar to the original, on the outside at least. What doesn't grow back are the vertebrae. Instead, there's a cartilaginous tube, which means from the site of the injury backwards, there's no more breaky points. And if you have to do it again, you better hope that you have some break points left. You know, that's why this one looks like he's having a moment. Damn it, it was just a shadow. And the tail's trying to crawl back to him. I'm not ready. It's like sperm on a carpet. Gecko, gecko, I know that you're gonna climb up on your little toes. Gecko, gecko, I know that you're gonna climb up on your little toes.